Dear friends, good day, everyone. It's a very big pleasure to me to be here today with our colleagues from Russia. I still talk. I can speak in Russia more or less, but today we're going to speak in English. So we can speak in Spanish too if our colleagues will present this still way. So we are living now in very complex period, historical period, geopolitical period. Yes, this epoch is not easy, and by the other way, we still looking for new ways, for new contacts and new projects between some so different countries, between so different regions like Russia and Latin America. In Latin America we have so many countries, so different countries, and more bigger, some countries very big, some countries very small, very poor, very rich. For example, just yesterday, I come back from Bolivia where I spent a week and could knew the culture, Bolivian culture, the people. So, I just want to say that here in Brazil we don't know exactly nothing about our neighbors' countries. This is a big problem, big problem. Every Brazilian knows so good, so well what's happening in London, in New York, in Paris, but what is happening here in Bolivia, in Peru, in Argentina, in Caracas, we don't know. We don't have information. It's very still information about the culture, about the traditions. Yes? So, I just want to put here, in start, this is one of problems for us, these internal problems. And, of course, when we look to Russia, we can see, of course, very big possibilities. But to explore and realize these potentials, these possibilities, we have, of course, to know ourselves and our neighbor countries. Yes? So, in this context, I want to give first the word for Dmitry. Yes? Please, Dmitry, let's start.
Thank you very much indeed. It's a pleasure to see you here. Good day, dear colleagues, friends. I'm going to speak about the current stage of Russian and Latin American relations, but I'm not a big optimist about this stage. I think that now, yes, we live in a very complicated period, and we have a lot of problems in our relationships. So, I'm going to start with the period of 19th, and you know that in this stage of our development in Russia, we have a lot of economic problems, and at that time, we don't have the commercial potential for cooperate with Latin America. Another reason of our problems was our orientation towards the Western world, and we don't see any other regions. I'd like to say about two examples. The first example, our former Minister of Foreign Relations, Andrei Kozyrev, was going to Latin America 3 times, and 3 times his visit was cancelled. Another example, Russia always support Cuba during the Soviet period, but in 19th, Russia stopped any help, any support for Cuba. He one time avoid from the votation in General Assembly when was discussed some anti-Cuban resolution. And for Cubans, it was like they were betrayed for us, and that situation was very difficult for our countries. The situation became changed after the historical visit of Evgeny Primakov. I talked about this yesterday. In 1996 and in 1997, he visited a lot of countries of Latin America. A lot of agreements were signed. And our new stage of Russian presence in Latin America began. I think that at this period, at that stage, we have a lot of advantages. First of all, it's historical advantages. We don't have any historical conflicts with Latin American countries. We didn't have any colonies in Latin America, and that's why we didn't have any contradictions between Russia and Latin American countries. The second advantage, at that time we was looking for some economic cooperation. We don't thinking about political or military cooperation, and our approach toward Latin America was very pragmatic. We were able to establish some relationship with left regimes and with right regimes. Just one example. We had very good relationship with the left government of Argentina during the government of Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner. But after Mauricio Macri came to power, there was no problem. We established good relations with him. And another factor which helped us to provide our policy in Latin America is, without any doubts, the left turn in Latin America. Because a lot of left government considered Russia as, so to say, they thought that Russia was going to continue the Soviet policy, that Russia had the Soviet ideology, and Russia is an alternative project of development. And for example, I remember that in 2010, Hugo Chavez was in Moscow. And he said, Hugo Chavez, I believe that Soviet Union didn't disappear. And this phrase, Soviet Union didn't disappear, was so important for Russians that after his words, a lot of people became applaud. And for example, Venezuela helped us to establish some contacts with different other countries. Our companies became work in Latin America. I'm speaking about energy companies, and first of all, Lukoil, Rosneft, some other companies. We established a lot of commission of high level, including Intergovernmental Commission with Brazil. In 2002, we created the Business Council between Russia and Brazil, and there were a lot of initiative of Russia and Latin American partners. We had a very good military cooperation, and for example, Latin American countries purchased Russian weapons for about $14 billion. Yes, the United States were trying to resist this cooperation, but without any success. But now, I think, the good news are over. And now we are in a very difficult situation, and the special military operation of Russia emphasized a lot of disagreements between Russia and Latin American countries. A lot of disagreements. First of all, we in our institute observe the situation in Latin American countries. We observe some reaction of Latin American elites and people, and we see a lot of criticism toward Russian military operation. What factors do we have? The first factor, I think that this connection which we had with the left regimes now had been broken. First of all, now West American lefts understood that Russia is not the left regime. We have a capitalist economy, we have a very conservative project of development, and we are not the alternative to the collective West. And the left regimes which we observe now, I mean left regime in Colombia, left regime in Peru, left regime in Chile, is a different kind of left. They have another ideology than, for example, Venezuela, Nicaragua, or Cuba in the beginning of the 21st century. They are very close to European lefts or to left wing of Democratic Party of the United States. And the Latin American left and share the ecological agenda. They criticize the violation of human rights, including the human rights in Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua, and they criticize the Russian military operation. I can mention about some words of the president of Chile, Gabriel Boric, which condemned Russia and Russian leadership for the operation in Ukraine. But the traditional lefts, I mean Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua, they do have a lot of economic problems. Well, first of all, we know that Venezuela is under a very difficult, a very hard sanctions, as they have to negotiate with the United States. And we know that this negotiation took place. In Cuba, we see the very difficult, the very hard food crisis, and they do have to maintain or negotiate with the United States and other Western countries. In Nicaragua, the situation is very similar because the trade between Cuba and the United States about $4 billion, and trade between Russia and Cuba is about 10 or several millions. So, another reason is a special military operation because we see, once again, a lot of disagreements about this operation. Why? Well, first of all, I can say that Latin American people observe this military operation through the Western media. And this situation can explain a lot of things, but not at all, not all. I think that we have to understand that the Latin Americans observe or consider the military operation through the history. Because we remember about some intervention of the United States, we remember some pressure on Latin American countries, and they associate the situation in Ukraine with their own history and don't support it. Another thing which we have to analyze is our idea. Once again, one thing about this. We have to understand that for Latin Americans, it's very important the idea of international law. And all military conflicts all military conflicts are not much to the international law. It's a problem. Another thing, it's a very important thing, is the concept of multipolar world. And this concept was very important for Russian and for Latin American. We share this concept, but I'd like to ask you, how many pros do you want to see? 2, 3, 4? I don't know. Because for Russia and for some others, big countries like United States or China or Russia, there is a conception of zone of influence. And what about Latin America? I know that in Latin America, they prefer, or you prefer, the concept of the multilateralism, when all countries have their priority in the international area. And it's a big contradiction between Latin America and Russia. And sometimes we saw some unpleasant newspapers with the notes, Russian imperialism. That's a very, very bad thing for us. Another thing, it's a very important thing up to me, it's our rhetoric of conservative values, conservative family values. We can imagine that, for example, for the government of Bolsonaro, it's a normal thing. But for a lot of Latin Americans, left Latin Americans, it's very, very difficult to understand or to accept these conservative values. It's a very great problem. And moreover, we have a lot of technical difficulties of our cooperation between Russia and Latin America. First of all, what we can bring to Latin America, what we can propose. Yes, we are good in our space industry, we are good in atomic industry, maybe in digital transformation, but anything else? And we have to find something important which we had to propose to our Latin American partners. We have to admit that Russia still depends on the Western technologies. And some sanctions of Western countries is a very big problem for us, for our relationship with Latin American countries. The Western sanctions is another problem. Yes, we know that Latin American countries didn't join to the sanction policy. But what can I say about some companies? Oh, for example, Embraer. Embraer stopped its cooperation with Russia. We have a very low amount of the direct investments in Latin America. In Mexico and in Brazil, but I think just two countries, Brazil and Mexico, our direct investments, more than $1 billion. It's very, very low. We can compare the situation with China, for example. A very difficult problem, and I agree with Pavel. We don't know a lot about Latin American. Our businessmen, our scientists, even our scientists, don't know a lot about Latin American countries. We don't know the interest of Latin American partners. It's a great problem for us. We don't have the agenda or the program of development of our economic presence in Latin America. We still have a lot of bureaucratic problem. First of all, our custom declarations is very, very difficult, and sometimes it's very difficult for our businessmen to fulfill these custom declarations. Another example, you know that Russian embassies can't help Latin American countries, for example, without any disaster, like in Cuba. They have to wait until these Latin American countries will ask them, please help us. And that's why, for example, the United States helped Cuba after the Hurricane Ian, and Russia not. And it's a great problem. So I think that now we have a lot of problems. We have a lot of disagreements. We have a lot of contradictions. But what we have to do? First of all, I think that we have, and it is a very serious task, to maintain some spheres of our cooperation, first of all, trade. I think we have some success in last year. Just want to say that in 2019, our trade between Russia and all Latin American countries was about $12 billion. Last year, our trade only with Brazil was about $10 billion. I think it's a nice result. Another thing, I think we have to modernize some our industry, which is impossible to cooperate now. Now, for example, our military cooperation. Yes, we can't continue our military cooperation, but we can imagine something new. No, for example, several years ago, we opened a policy school in Nicaragua, and I think it's a very good example of our cooperation with Latin American countries. Some other things. Yes, we have to understand more about Latin America, and we have to create some, I don't know, for example, online service or another service which will help Russian businessmen or to Latin American businessmen find itself, to understand the problem which we have in Latin America and in Russia. I think that we have to use the Russian society or Russian community which live in Latin America. There are a lot of Russians here. We can use some former student of Russian university, like Russian University of People Friendship, or like High School of Economics, for example. There are a lot of universities which we can use. But, and I'm going to finish my short presentation, I think that now the situation is very complicated, yes. But I believe that in the situation of lack of our conflicts, in the situation of lack of our contradictions, our relationship will be improved. And I hope it will be improved early, but not we have to wait. We have to wait a bit, because now it's very difficult to establish a very good context. There is a lot of political contradictions, but in 2 years, in 3 years, I think we will normalize our relationship. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Professor Dmitry Rozental. I think you appointed very interesting moments, and I think we can discuss maybe some points after presentation. Now I would like to give the word for Professor Olga Volosyuk. Please, Olga. Just 1 minute.
Yes.
Maybe we'll have, just to explain for our guests, we have more or less 1 hour to
45 minutes.
45?
Yeah.
So let's give
According
maybe
to
20 to 30 minutes for maybe for questions. Yes, okay, okay. Please.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. And as it was yesterday and becomes the tradition, I would like to give some more bright colors to the Russian-Latin American cooperation and relations. And it seems to me very important to add one thing, the position of Russian government in the recent years, which to my mind is very positive in the relations towards Latin America. Yes, there are different concepts in the academician circles, and yesterday those who participated in our discussions yesterday could notice that we have some different positions in some questions with Professor Rozental. That means only that we have a full democracy in Russia and we can represent different points of view. So, what I would like, the ideas that I would like to share with you now. Yes, I would like to talk about the actual relations, actual politics, and some prospects for the future. The year 2022 brought fundamental changes to world geopolitics in general and to Russia in particular, and we discussed it yesterday very, very profoundly. We have also discussed the sanctions against Moscow and a policy to achieve the diplomatic isolation of Russia. In this context, Russia redoubles its efforts to maintain close relations with so-called partner countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Recently, at the end of March, there was published a new edition of foreign policy concept of Russia, describing the new strategic goals of the Russian Federation in the international arena. The new foreign policy concept recognizes the emergence of the multipolar world as one of the most relevant shifts in the contemporary international system. For Russia, for official position of Russia, Latin America has an important role to play in this transition, since the region has the potential to become one of the power centers of the new emerging world order. According to the document, I'll cite, giving the progressive strengthening of the sovereignty and multifaceted potential of Latin American and Caribbean states, the Russian Federation intends to develop relations with them on a pragmatic, de-ideologized, and mutually beneficial basis. In a recent press conference about the results of Russian foreign policy in 2022, Russian Prime Minister Sergei Lavrov said that the relations between Russia and Latin America were on the rise. Sergei Lavrov has said that in 2022, Russia identified which countries it could trust and which ones it could not. And Latin American countries were surely partners with Moscow could work constructively during 2023 and in the future. I also told yesterday, we discussed that no Latin American country adopted the collective West economic sanctions against Russia, with the single exception of the Bahamas. As a result, Russian exports to Latin America last year grew to almost 4%. Russia exports of fertilizers and fuel grew substantially. And the exports of Russian wheat to Latin America, essential for guaranteeing food security and low inflation, have grown almost to 50%. Brazil also chose not to adopt sanctions against Russia. As a result, our trade relations also had a very good year in 2022. The cultural, scientific, technical, and humanitarian cooperation between Russia and Latin America countries were also maintained during the last year. Russia has a free visa regime with 27 of 33 Latin American countries, which guarantees people-to-people contacts on a wide range of areas. This is very important. I would like to repeat it. So we would like to invite you to Russia. Those who would like to come, you will not need to ask for a visa. Moreover, the number of Latin American students studying in Russia grows every year. I made a presentation of the university yesterday, and I told that really, that's not a theoretical conception. Really, in our university, the number of the students of different Latin American countries has grown, not only during the last year, but during the last, I have the numbers for around 3-5 last years, and the rise is noticeable. According to Minister of Foreign Affairs Lavrov, Russia is guided by some key principles when working with Latin American countries. First, Russia wants to make sure that there is no artificial dilemma with us or against us, meaning that countries in the region are sovereign and should not have to choose sides to work either with Moscow or either with other regional powers. Lavrov also noted that Russia does not have any so-called Monroe Doctrine approach to Latin America. On the contrary, Russia's relations with the region depend on the strengthening of the independence of Latin American countries. The more independent Latin American countries are, the better for Russia. In this context, and it is marked in the official governmental documents of Russia, Russia is indifferent if the governments in Latin America are politically on the right or leaning to the left. The interest is to build solid state-to-state relations which do not depend on the eventual change in the political environment. That is the position of Russian Federation. Definitely we should count on the position of each country of Latin America towards Russia. A good example of is Russian-Brazilian relation during Jair Bolsonaro government. When Bolsonaro was elected, many experts thought that Moscow and Brasilia would not be able to find a common political ground. Yes, as Professor Rozental told yesterday and today, we had difficulties in our bilateral relations in the first year of Bolsonaro government. But the mandate of Minister of Foreign Relations, Carlos França, was quite positive for bilateral relations. Minister França went to Moscow in November 2021 and organized a state visit of President Bolsonaro to Russia in February 2022. As a result, during the Bolsonaro years, relations between Brazil and Russia were deepened, especially in the fields as trade, political coordination, and cooperation in peaceful uses of nuclear energy. During the Brazilian elections in 2022, Russian President Vladimir Putin said many times that Russia was ready to work with the candidate chosen by the Brazilian people. He said, fortunately, Russia was able to maintain strong ties with both Lula and Bolsonaro, and in President Putin's own words, Russia is fine with Lula and it is fine with Bolsonaro. The most important thing is we do not interfere in the domestic political relations of other countries. After the elections, Putin called Bolsonaro to thank him for the cooperation between Brazil and Russia during his mandate, and the Russian president also spoke to Lula after his inauguration as a president in January 1st, 2023. In 2023, Russian-Brazilian relations, to my mind, keeping a very good pace. The Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov, has also already visited Brazil in April 2023, and it was his visit to various Latin American countries, among them, except Brazil, there were Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua. These countries are precisely the ones named in the new Russian conception of foreign policy as priorities for Moscow in the region. During his visit, Lavrov also noted that Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua and Russia had always supported each other in international arena, such as United Nations General Assembly. The most important moment of Lavrov's tours to Latin America was his visit to Brasilia, where he met the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mauro Vieira, the Brazilian President's International Council, Celso Amorim, and with President Lula himself. These meetings have shown that Brazil and Russia share important international objectives, such as, first, increase the de-dollarizations of the economies, and we talked a lot yesterday about this problem related to Latin America, related to Central Asia, if you remember, related to China, India, and so on. So that's the very important issue. Second, strengthening the emerging multilateral world order. Now, this idea, the idea of multilateral, of new world reality, of the multilateral world order, seems to be the key concept of Russian foreign policy. Third, deepening ties between non-Western countries. One of the examples also that we discussed yesterday was BRICS, the result of deepening of these kind of relations inside the one regional organization, international organization. And the fourth, guaranteeing the space to conduct independent foreign policy. After his meeting with Minister Vieira, Lavrov declared that, I cite, what unites Brazil and Russia is the will to form a fairer, multipolar world that reflects the interests of all states and not that of the specific group of states. Both ministers expressed the desire to deepen cooperation in key areas for bilateral ties, such as peaceful use of nuclear energy and of outer space, agricultural cooperation, and contacts in the fields of medicine and pharmaceutics. As we also discussed yesterday, Lavrov also reiterated a Russian support to Brazil's bid to become a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. Russia understands the importance that this seat has for Brazil's consolidation as an international power. Both countries share the view that the reform of the Security Council would contribute to building a more just and representative international order. Some time ago, there was organized a special group of the so-called the Friends of the Security Council, and Russia is a strong supporter of the developing of the activities inside the group. I also spoke yesterday by phone by some Russian diplomats who work in the United Nations, and there is, if I can pronounce it, rather inside information, the official position, actual position, Russian position as to the Security Council is the next. Though there are 4 countries that apply to be the members of the Security Council: Brazil, India, Germany, and Japan. The official Russian position is that Russia would not support the bid of Germany and Japan, but would support the bid of Brazil and India, and Brazil has to strengthen and make more active the position to become the members of Security Council, and Russia would support it fully. Lavrov has mentioned also Russia's support for Lula's intention to bring back Latin American integration to the top of the agenda. Minister Lavrov has praised Brazil's decision to rejoin the CELAC group, saying, "We hope CELAC will raise its voice in the process of resolving the key issues that are arise in the course of the formation of the multipolar world." It seems to me that I made too much citations, but on the other side, it seems to me that these citations are better than other comments, reflects the position of Russian Federation, so that's the words of our main officials, and we consider in Russia that this visit of Foreign Minister Lavrov to Latin American countries to be very important and pivotal point in the relations between our countries and between Russia and Latin America, as the topic of this session is the relations with Russia and Latin American countries in general. I think I was allowed to speak around 20 minutes, so I told for 22, 23. I think it would be interesting if you share your opinions on the situation, on the relations, and on the future, and we discuss it in the form of sharing our context. And I return the floor to our moderator.
Very well. Thank you, Professor Olga Volosyuk. So, dear friends, using the right of moderator, let me do two questions about our guests. Yes, and after that, I will give words for our friends here, our colleagues. Very interesting about what both professors tell us today. Thinking about this and about another perspectives, let me ask you, when we talk about relationship between so big regions like Russia and Latin America, of course we have many difficulties. This language difficulties, this geographic difficulties, because the distance is very big. This is the communication difficulties. So, how to get out of monopoly of a relationship between big government companies that is always present, and move to exchange to the new projects about, in private sectors, to new startups, to small companies projects. I think this can be a new segment, but in another way, maybe we need more information about each other's, of course. Maybe we don't know the culture about each other's. So where's the movies, where's the theater, where's the music festivals to get interest in simple people to know more about each other? What kind of vision have the Russian about us and our vision about Russia? It's always changing, but we can maybe some kind get a right direction for this vision. This is in our hands, I think. If we talk about so prestige institutes from Russia in government that represent in some kinds the Russian government. So to do a new vision, a right vision that we want to to offer for simple people. And where is the direct flights of aviation companies with our regions? It's very difficult to do business with Russia if I live in Brazil. If I always have to do a scale in Africa or Arabic strands, Turkish or Europe, will be very much easier if we develop it, and it will, of course, about the government. This is discussed to installate directly flight between about let's for example Rio and Moscow, Rio, Petersburg, or St. Petersburg, or another regions, Ekaterinburg, Sochi, Krasnodar, with not just from Moscow, Siberia, Ekaterinburg, Krasnodar, with our regions. This will be very nice, very nice. And the second question about the new, I think Russia is living now a very interesting period. We have to see, and I think we have to imagine in what kind of level, development level, will be Russia into 3-5 years after the sanctions. Imagine that Russia is how I know, Russia is living now a big mobilization moment. Mobilization in economy and industry, in intellectual mobilization, technology mobilization, in turn. Yes? So it's very, very possible that Russia in about 5 years will get in a very high level. So how we from here, from Latin America, can go with Russia in this direction, how we can help and how we can do a new project. Imagine this new level of Russia in 5 years, in 10 years. I think this is the point. This is the point to see in the future. So this is my question. Thank you for it.
Okay, thank you for the questions. I think it's very interesting. It's very complicated questions. But first of all, I'd like to say that yes, we cooperate with our government, but I don't represent the position of our government. I express my own position. I think it's important to say. But I think that in Russian society there is a stereotype about Latin America. We are thinking that Latin America is going to support us, is going to struggle against the United States, is going to struggle against the US imperialism, but I don't think that this stereotype is true. I think that Latin America has changed, and has changed dramatically. And Latin America has its own interests. And all countries in Latin America have its own interest. Now in our country, we in the Institute, we feel an interest towards Latin America. Our companies, our students, our organizations are going to know more about Latin America, are going to cooperate, are going to organize some forums or councils. But at the same time, I think, and I think that I have a right for this expression, I think that Latin American countries are not going to be close to Russia. They are not ready for this. Why? What we can do, and what we can do for improving the situation? The honest answer, we have to wait. But not only wait. We have to do we have to work hardly, because the lack of the direct flights, the lack of some mechanism of cooperation is a huge problem. During 90s and even during the last 20 years, we didn't think about this opportunity to cooperate with Latin America. We preferred cooperate with Europe, maybe with China, maybe with the United States, but we didn't think about Latin America, and now it's very hard to start this activity from the 0 point. But we have to do it. But this activity, I think it will take, I think, a lot of time. A few years, 4 years, I don't know. But it's a very big, big work. And speaking about your, the second question, about we are going to wait from Russia in the future. And once again, I can say the honest question, I don't know. Because the future is very unpredictable and we don't know what we will see in months, for example. You have said that in Russia we see the mobilized society. I don't feel it. I don't feel it because in our streets there are a lot of people, there are a lot of restaurants, very expensive restaurants. We live don't thinking about the military operation. It's impossible to think every time about the military operation. We have a lot of things to do. I remember that about a year ago, the journalist from Argentina visited Russia and he was surprised. He was thinking that Moscow is a military city with a lot of soldiers in the streets, but in reality, no. It's a normal life of our cities. I don't think that we mobilize now. Our economy, yes, I think our economy is mobilized, but not our society. And speaking frankly, we don't know what we're going to see in a year, what problem we will face. And it's a very complicated question, and I don't know, I think that nobody knows what we're going to see in a year. And I don't like to think about what we're going to see in 5 years, for example. I hope I will answer.
Thank you, Professor Dmitry.
Thank you very much for the questions. Starting with the first one. Yes, we have also yesterday discussed the difficulties between Latin America and Russia. To my mind, the main reason of that we were in deep crisis in 90s, and we had to choose the priorities, and mostly the priorities were the neighboring country, first. Second, from the historical point of view, also I'm historian. So the diplomatic relations of Russia with the Latin American countries were established at the beginning, at the beginning of 19th century. But economic and diplomatic relations, for example, with England, which now we consider the unfriendly state, and it was unfriendly during the whole history of Russian-British relations. But they were established, do you know when? In 1553. 16th century, 3 centuries later. So, usually, all the countries, they are establishing the relations with the neighbors first, as was Europe and some Asian countries for Russia. That's logical. Second, the crisis of the 19th, I have told about it, and there was the priority of Russian officials. Professor Rozental has named Foreign Minister Kozyrev, who was fully pro-American Russian foreign minister. Even he called to Washington and asked what were the priorities of Russian foreign policy. But this difficult time, and also from the historical point of view, we should understand that situation. And step by step, Russia was overcoming that difficult economic situation and trying to widen the circle of its political also cooperations. So, to my mind, the time has come to come back to the very good relations that had Soviet Union with a number of, there were different periods, that's clear. I don't want to say that everything was bright and rose colors, but there were good relations in different periods with, and Soviet government was rather active in that. What I see in the position of Russian government now, and I have cited too much the words of Foreign Minister Lavrov in Moscow or here in Brazil or in other Latin American countries, that Russian officials has a very strong desire to turn. We also spoke yesterday about Russia's turn to the East policy, which now is the official concept. But the East in the wide sense and the African, Latin American countries, so not only East as Asia. And in these things, I think that the activization of cooperation with the companies, big companies or small companies, it would be activated if the government demonstrates the political will to turn to Latin America more actively. So I think the Russian business will feel it very, very on the intuition level and consider. So definitely, I think that business needs some aid of political elites to. Yes, as to our vision of each other, our cultural relations, what do we know about each other? Yesterday we had a dinner with the General Consul of Russia in Rio de Janeiro, and he told us that in one of bookstores he found a book in Portuguese language about ancient history of Russia. Not Putin, not contemporary, not ancient history of Russia. Not all the Russians knows ancient history of Russia. So that could be the way. We see that there is interest in Brazil for studying Russian language. And one of the universities that we would visit even asked us to organize some kind of center of Russian language, coordinate as an example of Confucian, say, institutes of Chinese language. We have Pushkin institutes, so Russian house also, yes. So if there is an inspiration and a desire, I think that Russian, not political, but non-governmental organization, and Sergei Orlov is the representative of one of these Gorchakov Foundation, will be absolutely open to do it very, very quickly. As to the flights, I think now we are in very difficult situation because the flights are prohibited. So, and due to military action, we have to bypass Ukraine now, and it's a very long route. And surprisingly, we also bypassed Sudan. So the flights, yes, are very long now, but let's hope that this is temporary situation and we will. So I think the idea is very good, and when the time changed, and Russia now pays a lot of attention to construct its own planes, so we can open, yes, the connections between. As to the rise of Russia in 5 or say 3, 7, 8 years, I told yesterday that on the Russian statistics, Brazil has a very good rise, and in a year it would occupy the 10th place in world economy, overcoming Russia. Yes. So we will be in the equal conditions, and I think the cooperation would flourish. Thank you very much.
Just só para os nossos colegas. Prezados amigos, caso alguém esteja acanhado em fazer perguntas em inglês, no idioma inglês, vocês podem fazer em português e eu traduzo aos nossos convidados, ok? Só para deixar claro, para a gente não perder nenhuma pergunta, caso alguém tenha alguma curiosidade, enfim, alguma pergunta.
Just one note about the direct flights. Now our government is going to improve the situation, and we have established the direct flight to Cuba, for example, and there is a direct flight to Venezuela. It's a Venezuelan company, Confianza. But the problem, speaking about the Venezuelan company, that flight is not very regular, about one time in 3 weeks. And in Cuba, I hope it will be regular, but it will be very expensive, I'm afraid, for Russian people, for ordinary Russians. Thank you. But we are going to do something, and it's a good news.
Prezados amigos, convidados, por favor, estamos abertos a perguntas. We are open to questions from our guests, please. Who is first? Quem seria o primeiro? Dúvidas, comentários?
I asked a lot of questions yesterday, and we discussed a lot of topics yesterday, really, and covering also the Latin American and the Russia and Brazilian-Russian relations. So inside BRICS and outside BRICS. So yeah, probably that's
Por favor, se há alguma pergunta, prezados amigos. É uma oportunidade, eu diria, única, aproveitar a presença de tão ilustres professores da Rússia.
So, anyone has any questions? No? I'm going to take the chance. I didn't make any questions in the last section, so I'm going to make one now. So, Russia is cut off from the Western financial markets due to the sanctions, right? Including the Western governments confiscated hundreds of billions of dollars of Russian assets in European Union and United States, right? But this, on the other hand, perhaps opens an opportunity for Russia to diversify its investments. Do you think it's possible at this time that Russia sees Latin America and Brazil in particular as a place to make strategic kind of investments? Or they think, or the Russian government and Russian businessmen think that is a risky investment, including because this kind of investments would require some connection to the dollars and some vulnerability to sanctions as well. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I think that it's not a risk investment. I know exactly that now a lot of Russian companies and Russian banks are considering such countries like Mexico or Brazil is the place where they can make investments a huge amount. And I think that we don't have another option. But Latin America is a very good partner for us, but we have to do a lot of things for establishing normal cooperation. In my presentation, I said that we in Russia still have dependence on the Western technologies, but we can solve this problem using the technical cooperation. For example, in the festival between Russia and Brazil. I think there are a lot of technologies which we have and which you have, and we can cooperate, we can exchange these technologies. Still, I think Brazil and Russia still don't have a lot of technologies which, for example, the Western world have. but we have another technologies, and using this mechanism, we can compensate some our problems, I think. And I'd like to emphasize once again that now the interest in Russia to Latin America is increased dramatically. And I think they are looking for some new investments and looking for some markets. Just one note. Why China now prefers invest in Latin America than in, for example, in Africa? Because, it's my personal point of view, in Latin America we have rather developed institutions than in Africa. And these institutions make these investments more safety, if I can use this word. Thank you.
Just one pair of phrase. No, that's okay. Thank you. Yeah. I would say that the most, first, you're absolutely right, and thank you for your question. That's now a very important point, time, to change its politics. And there are two terms I would like to pronounce now. That's diversifying, as you told, and substitution. So that's the time for Russia to substitute the Western technologies and Western imports and trying to develop its own economy, its own industry. And it's also the time to make the diversification and in the economic point of view turn to the other partners. Certainly there would be problems, it's natural. We don't need to paint everything in a rose, right? There would be problems, different economic and another side political, but I think that's the time, and I hope all the problems would be overcome, and there would be a real development of economic situation, economic relations with our new partners, on the benefit of both.
Just one note, one thought that I found in my mind. I think the great problem of Russian diplomacy and policy that we are speaking about the global South as a united system. And sometimes it's not very good, because some processes in Africa is not corresponded to process in Latin America. And just for example, we speak a lot about the anti-colonial policy of these countries. Yes, I think that African countries can think about themselves that they are former colonies, but speaking about Latin American countries, I don't think that they have this mind. And we had to separate regions and to choose the adequate strategy toward Latin America, toward Africa, toward some other regions. This situation will take place only after a lot of time which we have to pay to Latin American studies and to improve, to increase the level of Latin American studies in Russia, because we still have a lot of problems in this sphere.
Prezados amigos, talvez alguém queira fazer alguma pergunta, um comentário? Não tem? Por favor, por favor. Se possível, ser presente, por favor.
First of all, thank you very much for both of your presentations. I'm a doctoral student of the International Political Economy program of this university. I'm Lucas Gualberto. We talked about different spheres of cooperation between Russia and Latin America, Brazil, and I think one of the most active ones. It's about scientific cooperation. You mentioned people-to-people cooperation in some parts of your presentation. my question is about this point. I'd like to know, in your opinion, in your personal position, what can we do to improve this specific sphere of cooperation? I mean, improving scientific programs and people-to-people cooperation, so we can know better both of our positions in the scientific sphere, especially.
Thank you. First of all, I think we have to understand the interest of our Latin American colleagues better than we understand now. Because sometimes we have to find some equipment, for example, some specialists on Latin American or in Latin American countries, but we don't know where to find. We don't know where, we don't know how. And I think that's our task, the principal task of Russian government and the governments of Latin American states to create some platform. Where we can cooperate, where we can exchange some opinions, we can establish some information about the interests of our regions in Russia and in Latin America. Because I think that in Brazil, for example, we have a very good level of science. We have a very good level of technological development. And I think that in Russia we do have some interesting examples of technological development. But we have to understand how to cooperate, how to, for example, to find our partners. And our government must, I like to use this word, must help, must support Russia and Brazilian science to do all their best in this sphere of cooperation.
Thank you very much for the question. I would like to say that it's a very important part of cooperation. You're absolutely right. Even if start with theoretical concepts, we call it scientific diplomacy. So we pay, not we Russia, but it's term, well-known term, so that's rather very important. From the practical point of view, I told yesterday that, for example, in the Higher School of Economics, we have 50 international laboratories where Russian and foreign scientists work, and the university is open to open the new ones just if there is idea of cooperation. Professor Lavrenthiv was in Moscow at our university some time ago, and he told me that he discussed with the Russian scholars, with his colleagues, the idea of international project where, as I understand, would be involved Russian and Brazilian scholars. So we are to have small practical steps. And there would be a result, not thinking when our government or government of Brazil will have time to think about so-called Russian diplomacy. It's their task, but our task is to do something and in practice.
Prezados amigos, se não temos mais perguntas, dear guests, if we finish now in this our seminary. Let me thank you from the name of our institute and university. We hope we spend a good time here with very efficient, and we will wait you for soon to come back to Brazil, to come back to Rio de Janeiro. Thank you everyone. Saying thank you.
Once again, dear colleagues and friends, thank you for the invitation. That were two exciting and very important days for us. And we also hope that we could meet in Moscow or we can meet, we can organize something. We have also discussed it yesterday with our General Consul. We can organize some Zoom conferences between Russian and Brazilian students with the students of 2 universities and discuss the issues that you're interested in, not only the academician issues, but any kind. So thank you very much.
So I just want to add one thing. I think for us it's a very good time, a very useful time, and very emotional time. I think that we had a lot of very interesting questions and comments about our presentation, and I agree with Professor Volosyuk that for us, we are waiting for you in Moscow or in some other Russian cities, and we invite you for cooperation, the different forms. We are waiting for your articles in our scientific magazines. We are waiting for your presentation in our conference, and I think that all form of cooperation will make our relationship better and interesting. Thank you very much indeed.